Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Do you have any favorite things? 2. Liang Yunxing's heart began beating faster. She was like a little fan who had sent a private message to her, hoping for a response. She waited anxiously. Would he really reply to her? 2. Yin Qianshun didn't hesitate. No, he answered simply. Point 2. She had originally wanted to find out what Yin Qianshun liked and prepare gifts for him based off of that. However, Liang Yunxing didn't expect that she would get such an answer. Point 2. It made sense, though. He didn't have any feelings. In terms of material things, he probably didn't have any needs. Most of the things that he liked were things that he wanted but couldn't get. Point 2. Liang Yunxing pursed her lips and didn't speak anymore. She was only bored and didn't have any worries. All she knew was to revolve around them all day. Point 2. After returning home, Liang Yunxing had a full stomach and took a nap. When she woke up again, it was already afternoon, and Yin Qianshun had left. Point 2. Liang Yunxing thought about it and asked Yu Siyue to go out to buy a gift. Point 2. So, you're buying a gift for Iceberg Face. Why did you ask me to come? Yu Siyue was obviously not happy. Point 2. You're also a boy. I asked you to be my reference. 2. A man. Yu Siyue emphasized. Point 2. Huh? Liang Yunxing blinked in confusion. Point 2. I said I'm a man. Yu Siyue corrected Liang Yunxing seriously. Point 2. Liang Yunxing paused for a moment. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. Correcting whether she was talking about a boy or a man was a childish move, too. Although Yu Siyue was upset, he was very happy to meet up with Liang Yunxing. He didn't care whether she was buying a gift for Yin Qianshun or not. Point 2. It's just that I have never heard of Yin Qianshun having any birthday habits. If he did, wouldn't there be a lot of people fawning over him? 2. Is that so? Liang Yunxing was confused for a moment. She could only attribute that to Yin Qianshun's cold personality. He didn't have much of a relationship with people. Point 2. After thinking about it, Liang Yunxing made her own decision. She wanted to make a set of soft clay dolls with her own hands. She had a foundation in art, so she'd be capable. She tried it out in the shop that sold clay and pinched a little hedgehog and a little rabbit. Yu Siyue shouted that it was too cute and then snatched it over. Point 2. The two of them were laughing and joking when a girl suddenly barged into the shop. She grabbed the red clay in the shop and smashed it on the ground while muttering, "Red dead, red dead," too. Yu Siyue subconsciously protected Liang Yunxing. In a moment, a few security guards came and subdued the girl, pressing her to the ground. Looking at her like this, they wanted to reach out and hit her. Point 2. Hey, let's not do this. I think she's a patient. Since she didn't hurt anyone, why don't we call the police first? Liang Yunxing called out to them. The girl was small and would definitely be at a disadvantage. Moreover, not only was she clean, but she also wore a brand, so she was probably not homeless. Point 2. Yeah, she's quite pitiful, Yu Siyue echoed. Point 2. Zhao Dao, are you okay? A tall man said, rushing in. He didn't look at anyone, but took out a stack of banknotes and threw them on the counter. This is compensation, too. He didn't even raise his head to look at the person next to him. He hugged the girl's shoulder and hurried out. Point 2. The interlude didn't affect the interest of the two of them. Liang Yunxing was in a hurry to go home after getting the design and the soft pottery production tools, ready to show off her skills. Point 2. Miss Yunxing, where did you go? Hao Cheng asked as he looked at Liang Yunxing. Point 2. If the soft pottery was to be baked, it had to be carefully placed. Hao Cheng, who knew the family like the back of his hand, probably couldn't hide it from her. Moreover, if she told him, he might be able to come up with ideas. Point 2. This is a birthday present for Yin Qianshun. I want to give him a surprise, Liang Yunxing said with a smile. Point 2. Birthday present. Hao Cheng's smile suddenly froze on his face, and his expression became strange. Point 2. Hao Cheng's expression became strange. He was conflicted and wanted to say something, but he hesitated. It seemed he wasn't willing to mention the matter. Point 2. What's wrong? Liang Yunxing looked at Hao Cheng. She didn't know why he suddenly made his expression. Point 2. Nothing. Hao Cheng shook his head. After hesitating for a moment, he said, Sir never celebrates his birthday. Miss Yunxing, you don't have to bother to prepare. 2. This was too out of Liang Yunxing's expectations. Hao Cheng, who always liked to jump between the two of them, actually said such a thing. Initially, Liang Yunxing thought that after he said this, he would jump up happily and take out a pink ribbon to help her wrap her gift point two. But he gave her a reaction she didn't expect point two. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't disappointed. Liang Yunxing had long memorized the special day and decided to give Yin Qianchen a surprise. She had hoped to see his expression beyond the iceberg point two. Although Liang Yunxing didn't know why Yin Qianchen didn't have the habit of celebrating his birthday, she still decided to give him her birthday present point two. No one would hate receiving a present. Moreover, Liang Yunxing had already made all the preparations. The present she gave to Yin Qianchen wasn't only a small gift made of soft clay, but also a painting that she had drawn herself. She had also already booked a train ticket to a small city in central Anhui. There were green mountains and rivers there, but the key point was that it hadn't been polluted by the commercial atmosphere point two. There were no famous historical sites, but the blue sky and white clouds were similar to the scene in the painting. When she thought of giving Yin Qianchen a gift, she inexplicably thought of the small city and the blue sky point two. Where had Yin Qianchen not been? The 7 continents and 4 oceans of the world had probably traveled. He probably wouldn't have noticed the scenery at the foot of the mountain, though point two. These things weren't valuable, but Yin Qianchen clearly didn't lack things like money point two. Since Hao Cheng had said that, Liang Yunxing thought that she shouldn't make him her ally. This time, she would make her own decision point two. Liang Yunxing had already made a set of lifelike clay figurines. She arrived at the station early the day before Yin Qianchen's birthday point two. It was early autumn. There were a few cicadas that hadn't yet disappeared, chirping on the trees, as if they were still telling people about the aftertaste of the summer point two. Liang Yunxing carried her bag and held her mobile phone in her hand. She wrote, deleted, and wrote. Finally, she sent a message to Yin Qianchen, telling him that she was waiting for him here. There was no response for a long time. This wasn't like the usual Yin Qianchen. Liang Yunxing's message was from her personal phone. As long as he wasn't busy, he would at least give a reply no matter what his thoughts were point two. If Liang Yunxing remembered correctly, Yin Qianchen hadn't left the house before she went out. He wouldn't have left the house after such a short while. Right too. Perhaps she was too capricious? If Yin Qianchen didn't come, she would go alone point two. The phone suddenly rang. Liang Yunxing's heart suddenly sped up and jumped to her throat. However, when she took a look, it wasn't Yin Qianchen point two. It was Hao Cheng. He probably noticed that she was out and called to ask why point two. Hello, two. Miss Yunxing, where are you? Hao Cheng sounded very anxious point two. What happened, two? You really want to treat Sir well, right? Hao Cheng asked point two. Liang Yunxing was stunned. She didn't know why Hao Cheng suddenly said that, but she responded softly point two. If you really treat Sir well and want to help him celebrate his birthday, I'll pick you up now and go somewhere. Please, you must help him. Two. I'll pick you up now and go somewhere. Two. What do you mean? Liang Yunxing asked point two. Hao Cheng paused for a moment on the other end of the phone, but as if he was afraid of wasting time, he said quickly, Miss Yunxing, please don't ask. It's hard to say. I'll explain face to face when we get there. Two. Had something happened at home? Liang Yunxing was uneasy. She gave the address and waited for Hao Cheng's arrival point two. Thinking about it, Yin Qianchen was indeed being a little strange. He must have known that she had left the house, but he didn't ask where she had gone point two. Even Hao Cheng was strange. He didn't even realize that he had left the house. It was unknown what he was busy with point two. Now, it seemed that the idea that he had come up with was a little childish. What was the legend about a trip that could be taken at will? What was the world so big that he wanted to go out and take a look? It was really funny. If Yin Qianchen knew about this plan of his, he would definitely activate his taunting skill point two. But taunting was still taunting. Perhaps Yin Qianchen would cooperate and carry out the trip to the end point two. Hao Cheng's car arrived. Liang Yunxing greeted him and sat in at point two. It was very strange that Hao Cheng didn't bring a driver, but drove the car himself point two. This is a secret about Sir and the Yin family. Hao Cheng took a deep breath and sighed point two. What? Yin Qianchen's secret and also his family. For the first time, Liang Yinsheng felt fear, excitement, and panic interweaved in her body. Point 2. Later, we'll go to look for Sir. At this time of the year, he will go there. Hao Chang said. Point 2. There. Liang Yunxing's mind was a mess, and she only knew to ask back. Point 2. A place that is comparable to hell, Hao Chang said with a smile, but his smile was full of ridicule. It wasn't known whether he was mocking the place or laughing at his own power. Point 2. Hao Chang drove for a long time and drove into a narrow road that only allowed one car to enter and exit. There were trees all around, as if it was a real, desolate forest. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng couldn't help but frown. She was afraid. Where did he drive to? So there was such a place in the city where she lived. Point 2. The view in front of them widened a little. Point 2. What appeared in front of them was a house that was similar to an ancient castle, but it wasn't a gorgeous castle. It was more like a witch's dark castle. The house was very old, and the exterior was crawling with cats. Point 2. Hao Cheng parked the car in front of the house. As he got out of the car, he said to Liang Yinsheng, "The second floor, the third room, 2. Liang Yinsheng got out of the car and came to the front of this house. Hao Cheng stood behind her and said, "This door isn't locked. You can just push it gently, but Miss Yinsheng, you can also choose to go back with me now. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure what will happen when you know this secret, and what kind of changes will happen between you and young master, 2. She pushed open the door. Point 2. She was pushing open the secret about Yin Qianqian. She would be inextricably entangled with him. Point 2. If she turned around and left, she would be able to continue living under the cover of Yin Qianqian as an ignorant Cinderella. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng took a deep breath. She had to make a decision, and she had already made it, too. Even if she was scolded by Yin Qianqian for being a busybody, it didn't matter if she was chased back by him. Liang Yinsheng felt that she should go in and take a look, too. After all, it wasn't a small matter for Hao Cheng to be so serious. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng reached out and pushed open the door. Point 2. It creaked. Point 2. The interior of the house was dim. It was shrouded in an eerie feeling, but it was surprisingly clean. Point 2. It wasn't like what Liang Yinsheng imagined. After pushing the door open, dust flew, and there were spider webs everywhere. The interior of the house was dark, but the design was very good. The furniture and supplies were all there. If a light could light up the entire house, then it would really be a warm little home. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng tried to find a light switch, but Hao Cheng held her hand and shook his head. Point 2. Let's go upstairs to see Sir first, Hao Cheng said quietly, making the atmosphere more subtle. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng nodded. Hao Cheng's every move was the only reference she could follow. Point 2. According to what Hao Cheng had just said, on the second floor in the third room, Yin Qianqian could be found. Liang Yinsheng counted 3 doors through. There was a small window facing the corridor. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng went over to take a look. Fortunately, the curtains weren't closed. She saw a person sitting inside the room. He was still, as if he had lost his soul and was a lifeless puppet. Point 2. Yin Qianqian, too. Liang Yinsheng secretly said his name. She pressed on her chest, as if she could feel the sorrow he was emitting from his body. Point 2. What was going on? Liang Yinsheng covered her lips, afraid that the slightest sound would alarm the people in the room. Point 2. What exactly happened to make him reveal so much sadness, too? This is the prison that Madame Yin used to keep Sir in. So, you see, even if the furnishings are perfect and everything is in place, it still has gloomy darkness. Hao Cheng whispered into Liang Yunxing's ear. Point 2. Madame Yin is Yin Qianqian's mother? Why would she do that? Liang Yunsheng was shocked. What kind of mother would lock up her child in such a scary place? 2. Hao Cheng shook his head. I was young at the time and didn't know much about the internal affairs of the Yin family. I only knew that Sir had suffered a lot in his childhood. 2. Then why did he come here on his birthday? 2. Sir was locked up on his birthday. Something else happened, but I still don't know the details. 2. No wonder Hao Cheng told her that there was no need to celebrate Yin Qianqian's birthday. Point 2. So he'll just stay in there? Won't he eat or drink? Liang Yinsheng asked. Point 2. Hao Cheng nodded. Point 2. How could it be 2? Liang Yinsheng pulled the lock on the door and sure enough, it was locked from the inside. In Qianxian. Liang Yunsheng gently knocked on the door and called out his name. Point 2. Looking through the window, In Qianxian moved a little, but they couldn't see his expression clearly. They only knew that he didn't get up and walk over to open the door for Liang Yunsheng. Point 2. If he didn't open the door for them, they could only force their way in. Yes, they had to force their way in too. This lock wasn't only on the door, it was also locked on In Qianxian's heart, too. Liang Yunsheng pushed the door twice. Of course, she couldn't open it. Point 2. In Qianxian, are you going to open the door or not? Liang Yunsheng stood in front of the door and slammed it a few more times. She had mustered up all her courage to do such a crazy thing. Point 2. She wasn't touching the tigers, but pulling the tiger's whiskers out of its mouth. Point 2. Hao Cheng had already given her a chance to choose before this, and it wasn't just once. Point 2. On the phone, he asked her if she truly treated In Qianxian and pushed open the door of the old house. He asked her if she would choose to go back or get entangled with In Qianxian. Point 2. Entangled. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng pounded on the door again. Point 2. It should have been long ago when he brought her out of the Liang family, or when she bumped into him that rainy night. She had already lost her mind. Point 2. Suddenly, the door handle started to turn. Liang Yunsheng took a step back. She was so nervous that she could only hear her heart thumping. Point 2. The door was opened. In Qianxian showed a fragility that he had never shown in front of her. Point 2. His entire body was surrounded by gloom. His handsome face was gloomy, and there were heavy green shadows under his eyes. He clearly hadn't rested well. He blended into the horror of the house. Point 2. It was unusually calm, but the calmer it was, the more abnormal it was. It wasn't the usual In Qianxian, too. What happened? You want to do this? You can tell us. Liang Yunsheng took a deep breath and tried to look calmer. She couldn't show how afraid she was. Point 2. In Qianxian's hand was still on the door handle, and his eyes fell on Liang Yunsheng. Liang Yunsheng swallowed. His eyes were like two shackles that suddenly shackled her body, rendering her immobile. Point 2. The atmosphere was too oppressive. Point 2. Although In Qianxian was cold and emotionless, he just stood there silently, looking at her. Point 2. This. Liang Yunsheng suddenly remembered something. She hurriedly took out a small box from her bag and handed it to In Qianxian. This is a gift for you. 2. She deliberately skipped the word birthday. Point 2. She knew that he'd probably be uncomfortable listening to it. She just wanted to give him a gift. It shouldn't cause him to be disgusted. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng handed the box to In Qianxian. Point 2. In Qianxian remained still. He didn't even glance at the box. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng just wanted to ease the atmosphere. She held the gift in her hand, but he didn't even want to reach out to take it. The two of them were in a stalemate. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng's thoughts were running wild. Point 2. In Qianxian suddenly made a move. Without warning, he raised his hand and hit the gift box in Liang Yunsheng's hand, launching the gift. Point 2. With a crash, the box fell to the ground. The contents made a crisp sound. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng squatted down and opened the box in a hurry. Point 2. It was a small crystal house. Inside, it was 4 color pottery dolls. A handsome man in a suit with a straight face, a lively girl, a man in a tuxedo who looked like a butler, and a yellow puppy. Point 2. Fortunately, the broken pieces were all the house itself. The dolls were still intact. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng squatted, holding the colored pottery in her hands. Her eyes couldn't help but heat up. Point 2. Don't cry, she thought. Don't let him look down on you. Point 2. Don't cry, she thought. Don't let him look down on you. The thing isn't even broken, too. Even though she repeatedly used words to comfort herself, the feeling of her heart being trampled under someone's feet wasn't good. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng sniffled and remained on the ground. Point 2. Hao Cheng saw that she hadn't stood up for a long time and was a little anxious. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward and asked, Miss Yunsheng, are you all right? 2. When a mist in her eyes had dissipated a little, Liang Yunsheng tried her best to make herself look fine. She stood up and shook her head at Hao Cheng with a smile. I'm fine, too. Liang Yunsheng walked to In Qianxian again, pursed her lips, and raised the corners of her lips. She held the dolls in her hand in front of him again. I made this and wanted to give it to you. Look, they are family. Because of the protection of their family, Even if they encounter big storms, even if they are thrown to the ground, they will not be hurt. 2. Liang Yunxing blinked and continued. So, are we the same? If you have anything to say, you can tell me, and how Cheng we, too. Who? You aren't allowed to come. This was a reprimand. Point 2. Liang Yunxiang trembled, and she suddenly felt cold. Her heart was full of disappointment. The words she said from the bottom of her heart just now still couldn't melt the frozen heart of the man in front of her. Point 2. Hao Cheng stepped forward and blocked Liang Yunxiang. He lowered his head and explained weakly, Sir, don't blame Miss Yunxiang. I was the one who brought her here. 2. In Qianshun reached out his hand and said nothing. He slapped Hao Cheng's face without holding back. Hao Cheng's body swayed. Blood was already seeping out of the corner of his lips. Point 2. Liang Yunxiang cried out in surprise. How could she not know how powerful In Qianshun's palm was, too? As expected, this slap was stopped by Hao Cheng's hand. About 3 years ago, I discovered Sir's secret. Every year, I would follow you when you weren't paying attention. Hao Cheng was In Qianshun's least guarded person. At the same time, he had the most vulnerable and dangerous existence. Point 2. In Qianshun mercilessly slapped him in the face again. Hao Cheng couldn't stand steadily. Point 2. Sir, Hao Cheng did wrong. But Miss Yunxiang doesn't know anything. She was just invited by Hao Cheng to help you. 2. In Qianshun went to raise his hand again, but Liang Yunxiang pounced on him and hugged his arm tightly. Point 2. Don't hit him anymore. He didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong. No, we were wrong. We were all very wrong and wanted to save you. The devil, too. Miss Yunxiang, too. Liang Yunxiang was stunned. Her words just came out. Her face instantly turned pale, too. She didn't mean it. She just wanted him to stop and not hurt the people who really cared about him. Point 2. You can go now, In Qianshun said in a deep voice. Point 2. Hao Cheng was stunned. He did not expect In Qianshun to let them go so easily. It was just 2 slaps, and he had committed such a huge crime. It was over, too. Hao Cheng lowered his head, turned around, and left. After taking 2 steps, he turned back. Miss Yunxiang, where are you going? I'll send you first, too. Liang Yunxiang hesitated for a moment, but she still raised her foot and was ready to follow him. Can you still drive? I'll send you to the doctor first. Ah, too. In Qianshun grabbed Liang Yunxing's arm and pulled her to his side. He gritted his teeth and said, I said that he can walk. I didn't say that you could leave. In Qianshun's aura was ruthless. Liang Yunxiang felt afraid. Point 2. You first let go. She pursed her lips and pretended to be calm as she spoke. Point 2. Her fair arm was held by him, as if he could break it with the tiniest force. Point 2. Sir, it's my fault. It really has nothing to do with Miss Yunxiang. It's all my own doing. If you feel that it's not enough to vent your anger, I can also... Hao Cheng saw the situation and knew that it wasn't the time for him to leave. He turned around and walked back while explaining. I said, I'll let you go, In Qianshun said faintly. Although there was no change in his voice, his aura strengthened. Point 2. It was a feeling of being suppressed by a powerful force. Point 2. It was like the law of the jungle. As long as all the animals in the forest heard the slightest sound of the king of beasts and smelled a trace of his aura, they could do nothing but bow to him. Point 2. It was a food chain that couldn't be ignored. Point 2. Without saying any more, In Qianshun pulled Liang Yunxiang into the room and closed the door with a bang. Point 2. In Qianshun controlled Liang Yunxiang with one hand and locked the door with the other. Point 2. Hao Cheng rushed to knock on the door, but he received no response. Point 2. Sir, too. Hao Cheng's face was pale. It was the sequela of being slapped by In Qianshun and worrying about what would happen to Liang Yunxiang. Point 2. Most people who knew In Qianshun knew how cruel and ruthless he was. Most of the time, it was just hearsay and rumors. Point 2. Not many people had actually seen In Qianshun's ruthlessness, or rather, most of the people who had seen him were no longer in this world. Point 2. Hao Cheng was one of the few people who was close to In Qianshun. He had the opportunity to see how he treated those unwilling to obey him. Point 2. What are you trying to do? It hurts. Let me go. Liang Yunxiang struggled to break free from In Qianshun's shackles. Point 2. Yin Qianshan pushed Liang Yunshang forward with a little strength and pushed her onto the bed. The door was locked, so he let her go. However, even if he hadn't locked the door, she wouldn't have been able to escape. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng felt a sharp pain where her arm was grabbed. She frowned and stepped back. Are you trying to punish us for acting on our own? 2. Yin Qinshan said nothing. He simply approached Liang Yunsheng. Point 2. Don't come closer, 2. His aura was too dangerous. She was like a small animal that had sensed the great danger. All the hair on her body stood up. She vigilantly picked up the pillow beside her and threw it at him. Point 2. Yin Qianshan turned his head and caught the pillow. Point 2. The fear in Liang Yunxing's heart was like a vine that had been watered. It grew crazily. She threw all the pillows. Of course, none of them slowed Yin Qianshan down. Point 2. Yin Qianshan bent down and pressed down on her wrist with one hand. The other hand pinched her delicate chin and forced her to look at him. Point 2. Their eyes met. Point 2. His dark brown pupils were full of evil and wanted to tear her apart and eat her up. No, 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 no. This isn't right. This isn't Yin Qianshan. Liang Yunxing thought. Point 2. It wasn't the Yin Qianshan she knew, too. She blinked, hoping to sweep away the panic in her eyes. She had to face Yin Qianshan calmly, too. What's wrong with you? Liang Yunsheng looked at him again, hoping to find a trace of the past in his eyes. Point 2. Just like you said, I'm a devil. Should I do something that only a devil would do? Yin Qianshan grabbed Liang Yunxing's wrist and fixed it above her head, causing her half-sitting body to change its position. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng fell backward violently. Her hands were pressed down by Yin Qianshan, and she couldn't move. Point 2. Oh, 2. Before she could recover, her red and delicious mouth was invaded the moment she made a speak. Point 2. Yin Qianshan kissed her mercilessly. The kiss wasn't like the past at all. It was to tease her, to see her blush in embarrassment. Instead, it was burning, killing, and snatching, not giving her any chance to resist. Point 2. Her lips and tongue entwined. She gave a little humph, but it seemed more ambiguous when it came out. Point 2. The last thread of clarity, Liang Yunsheng could still kick her legs, and hoping Qianshan would let her go. Point 2. Aware of her resistance, Yin Qianshan left leg slightly bent, holding her legs. Point 2. Kiss 2. Kiss 2. A long, lingering kiss. Point 2. No, perhaps in the end, it wasn't a simple kiss, but a bite. Among show is biting the mouth of the prey. Point 2. Both of them could taste the bloody smell in their mouths. Neither could tell who it belonged to. Point 2. Finally, Liang Yunsheng didn't know whether she'd completely given up or she was kissed until she lost all her strength. She just laid still, as if she'd lost her breath. Point 2. But the kiss and biting that invaded her didn't stop. Point 2. How long had it been? Neither of them knew. It wasn't until Yin Qianshan finally had enough that he slowly stopped his action that the air in the room seemed to slowly melt away. Point 2. Why? Liang Yunxing's voice trembled slightly, and a tear slid down the corner of her eye. Point 2. Why do you want to do this kind of thing to hurt the people who care about you? She had a lump in her throat as she spoke. Point 2. Yin Qianshan's paused for a moment because of Liang Yunxing's words, but it was only a slight pause that was almost imperceptible. It didn't affect his hands that were causing trouble. Point 2. Care about me? Yin Qianshan's voice was very low. He lowered his head and put his lips next to Liang Yunxing's pink cheeks. You know very well why you care about me. If you don't have me, you don't have anything. You're nothing, too. I don't. Before she could retort, she was shocked by Yin Qianshan's next move and screamed. Point 2. He grabbed one of her collars and pulled it out forcefully. The button around her neck popped off. Point 2. Just like the wound on Liang Yunxing's heart. Point 2. Liang Yunxing never thought that such a thing would happen to her. She never thought Yin Qianshan would do such a thing, too. His action that had nothing to do with desire. He was just venting his emotions and punishing himself. Point 2. Liang Yunxing's collar was torn open, revealing her slender and fair neck. Point 2. Yin Qianshan covered her neck with his palm and gradually tightened his fingers. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng was very clear about the strength of this hand. Her arm could have been broken if he had exerted more force. 2. The air entering her body through her mouth became thinner and thinner. The fear of dying made her understand that she had to do something immediately. 2. So what if you kill me? You'll only make it harder for others to get close to you. Hao Chung will feel guilty for the rest of his life. He shouldn't have brought me here. And we are just trying to help you, too. She saw that his eyes were bloodshot. Perhaps his soul had really been devoured by the devil, and he could turn into a mad demon at any time. 2. So she decided to say it. She said everything that she wanted to say in her heart. 2. Hao Chung and I, no matter who it is, we can't just ignore you. But we still took the risk of being treated like this by you. Liang Yinsheng struggled hard. Of course, it was fruitless, but she wanted to tell him that she hadn't surrendered yet. 2. We just want you to get better. We don't want to see you become like this. In Qinshen, please wake up too. Liang Yinsheng's words were emotional even if she didn't cry. However, In Qinshen's eyes were still cold and silent. 2. Yes, he wouldn't be moved. Her words weren't reason enough to stop. 2. I have seen clearly the relationship between people. Other than benefits, jealousy, and hatred, what else is there? 2. Why do you have to be so extreme? Liang Yunsheng retorted. Just because you've been hurt before, you want to hurt others? That's a vicious cycle. There won't be a good ending. 2. Shut up. In Qinshan pinched Liang Yunsheng's chin, making it impossible for her to open her mouth and say anything else. What do you know? 2. In Qinshan slowly dropped the clothes on her shoulder with one hand and slid them down to her arm. Liang Yunsheng trembled slightly and moved her body, but she couldn't stop him. 2. Is being abandoned by your parents the greatest pain? Actually, it's not entirely true. They didn't abandon you. They just despise you for not being good enough. Just being ignored, you can't stand it anymore. You're just a little sparrow with a burst of pride. 2. After being hit in the sore spot, Liang Yunxing's eyes widened. She looked at In Qinshan in disbelief. Her heart ached, but it wasn't because of the heartache, but because of his words. 2. In Qinshan lowered his head and kissed Liang Yunxing's smooth and delicate shoulder. This is what you did, too. Liang Yunsheng was stunned. This was what she did. 2. She opened other people's scars and said confidently that the pain wasn't on her body. Even if the pain was the same, there was no empathy. 2. In Qinshan held her head with one hand and opened his mouth to bite her fair neck. Liang Yunsheng felt a piercing pain on her neck. 2. Sharp teeth slowly pierced into her skin. It was an unforgettable pain. 2. Her delicate skin was bitten, and soon, drops of bright red blood oozed out. 2. In Qinshan straightened his body after tasting the blood. You said that I'm a demon. That's not wrong, actually. Demons want to devour blood and thirst for bones. Are you afraid to be by my side? 2. Liang Yunxing's jaw was loosened, but her entire body was in pain. Have you been hurt? She managed. 2. No, I have a demon's bloodline, too. Liang Yunxing paused for a moment. In Qinshan's words were confusing and strange, but she actually clearly understood his meaning. The so-called demon's bloodline, he referred to as the In family. 2. I can't agree with what you said. If there's only profit and hatred between people, then what's the meaning of everything we do? Whether it's profit or hatred, it's all because people are pursuing happiness, looking for love. At least I know that such a person doesn't help me because of profit. 2. In Qinshan completely let go of her and walked to the window on the other side of the room. He lowered his eyes and looked out of the window, not making a sound. 2. Liang Yunsheng caught her breath and walked down from the messy bed. Should she try to escape? 2. Her feet didn't listen to her. She looked at In Qinshan, who was covered in sadness, and felt she couldn't leave. 2. She wasn't the savior, but she was thinking that maybe when In Qinshan was hurt, as long as she gave him a warm embrace, he wouldn't be like this, too. Liang Yunsheng hugged him from the side. He had just made such a big move, but he was still cold to the bone. 2. Despite her abrupt action, In Qinshan didn't move. After a while, he reached out his hand and gently brushed his thumb across her neck. He lowered his eyes. 2. Aren't you going to ask me who that is? Liang Yunsheng made a small sound, which was unusually sweet, like a little lover saying intimate words in her ear. 2. She didn't expect an answer from him. 2. He is a person, she continued, that everyone is afraid of. I feel that he is like his own savior. Even if you think the pain in my heart isn't worth mentioning, that is the entire life of Liang Yunsheng, her parents, family, and life. 2. Liang Yunsheng paused for a moment and sighed inaudibly. Perhaps it is different for you, she said, the one who is shouldering a heavier responsibility. My small world is made up of those things that aren't worth mentioning. If one day it suddenly collapses, I might really die. Fortunately, you appeared. Tell me, don't give up. I can become better. I can make everyone look at me again, too. Liang Yunsheng turned to him and held his face in her hand. She raised her head and pressed her lips lightly against his point, too. In Qianshun didn't move. His eyes still maintained his usual coldness, point, too. Liang Yunsheng gently rubbed his lips, and her face couldn't help but turn red, point, too. She'd never done such a bold thing, but it was a kiss that she was willing to offer, point, too. A pure kiss, point, too. It contained no lust. It was just a simple and reassuring touch, point, too. A faint sunset shone through the branches and leaves in the forest and into the window. Liang Yunxing's fair and tender face was flushed, as if she was offering up her purest and most beautiful self, point, too. Was this the first kiss in her heart? 2. This can also be a way to kiss people. Liang Yunsheng let go of him and shyly looked up at him. A kiss is a way for people to express their feelings. It should be like this. You don't have to kiss so hard and painfully every time. It should be gentle, too. The two of them maintained a moment of silence, and Liang Yunsheng said nothing more, point, too. Let's go, In Qianshun finally said. His voice was a little hoarse, point, too. Are you coming too? Liang Yunxing asked in a low voice, point, too. In Qianshun took the lead in opening the door and walking out, point, too. Had she succeeded, too? Liang Yunxing couldn't help but be excited in her heart, point, too. It allowed him to return to the normal In Qianshun, too. She was sure that when he told her to go back, the hostility in his eyes had dissipated. Even though he was still indifferent, it was enough, too. When they walked out of the house, Hao Chang was no longer there. He must have realized that he couldn't help, so he left, point, too. The sun was already setting, and it was almost dark. They had to hurry to leave to gloom, point, too. In Qianxin's car wasn't parked far away. He motioned for Liang Yunxing to stand and wait for him, point, too. However, before he could drive over, another domineering off-road sport car pulled up, point, too. It stopped exactly 1 meter away from In Qianxin, point, too. In Qianxin didn't step back, but Liang Yunxing broke out in a cold sweat, point, too. A man got out of the car. With just one glance, one could see that his lines were cold and hard. He was so imposing that no one would dare to give him a second look, point, too. He was handsome, but his face was rough and he looked more mature. He couldn't be compared with In Qianxin's handsomeness, point, too. He and In Qianxin had extremely similar brows, point, too. Hao Cheng hurriedly walked out from the passenger seat. His expression was much better than when he left, point, too. He followed behind the man. When he saw that Liang Yunsheng and In Qianxin were already standing outside the house, he quickly came forward and asked, Miss Yunsheng, are you all right? Too. Who is this? Liang Yunsheng asked with a frown, point, too. The strange man didn't give Liang Yunxing a good feeling, point, too. His name is In Juanze. He is a young master of the Yin family, Hao Cheng answered, with a regretful look on his face, point, too. He was also a member of the Yin family, point, too. Liang Yunsheng was shocked and didn't have time to think. In Juanze had already thrown a punch at In Qianxin, point, too. What was going on? Brothers meeting. It was rare to see such a big fight all of a sudden, too. Liang Yunsheng was swept away by In Juanze's punch, point, too. She wasn't worried that In Qianxin could dodge this punch. However, he hadn't eaten or drank for a day, and his mental state was on the verge of collapse. Was he really not going to be hurt, too? Fortunately, In Qianxin was still agile. He even raised his hand and grabbed In Juanze's wrist. Seeing the veins on the back of his hand bulging, it was obvious that he had used all his strength. In Juanze couldn't move, point, too. Is this how you greet your brother? In Juanze asked coldly, point, too. In Qianxin let go of his hand as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Brother? What is it, too? How long has it been since you've been home? In Juanze curled the corners of his lips and sneered. He looked up at the house. You still remember this place, too. Shut up, too. Liang Yunsheng had never seen In Qianqian so emotional. Point 2. Presumably, his brother also knew about his past. Since you have no problem, I'll go back first. Don't forget what I said and come home sometime, too. In Juanza got back in his car and sped away. Point 2. In Qianqian slowly walked to Hao Cheng and nodded gently. Hao Cheng has really improved. Now he not only knows how to interfere in my affairs, but also knows how to find people to deal with me. 2. In Qianqian got closer, and Liang Yunsheng quickly stepped in, opening her arms. Point 2. Don't hit him, too. Hao Cheng had already been slapped twice by him. In Juanza was most likely the one he found to help her. Although she also hated that person, she had to admit that In Juanza was probably the only person she had ever seen who could compete with In Qianqian in terms of imposing manner. Point 2. Hao Cheng was so loyal to her, so she couldn't watch him be punished by In Qianqian again. Point 2. In Qianqian glanced at her indifferently and said nothing. He got in the car and drove away. Point 2. He left without waiting for them. 2. Liang Yunsheng couldn't help but feel depressed. Point 2. In Qianqian left first. Hao Cheng then turned around and looked at Liang Yunsheng carefully. Her cherry lips were red and swollen, and there were bite marks on them. Her clothes were messy, and the buttons on her collar were missing. The most important thing was, too, on Liang Yunsheng's fair and clean neck, there was a scab forming. Hickey, too. He couldn't bear to look at it, too. Hao Cheng held his forehead. Liang Yunsheng saw his action and immediately asked with concern, Hao Cheng, are you okay? Are you dizzy? In Qianqian really is too much. Anyway, we're going to drive away. So why don't you drive us away, too? Hao Cheng felt that after hearing Liang Yunsheng's words, he really felt a headache. Miss Yunsheng, it's understandable for Sir to act like this. No one would be happy if you protected another man like you did in front of him. It's a miracle that the two of us didn't die here today. 2. Liang Yunsheng didn't pay much attention to Hao Cheng's words because her mind was full of questions about In Qianqian. Point 2. This was a miracle, Hao Cheng thought. Point 2. To be able to calm down In Qianqian, who had fallen into an inhuman state, and return to normal. Liang Yunsheng was probably the first person to. I want to know more about In Qianqian. Liang Yunsheng wasn't scared. Instead, she wanted to know what had happened to make him like this. Point 2. She didn't know anything about him, so she wasn't qualified yet. However, she could wait until that day came. Liang Yunsheng thought that her relationship with In Qianqian would change because of the incident that day. However, nothing had changed. Point 2. Hao Cheng, on the other hand, always teased her, saying that he was grateful to God for giving them Miss Yunsheng. Point 2. The fact that In Qianqian had no reaction to the incident was the biggest change. Point 2. Until 1 month after In Qianqian's birthday, on a sunny afternoon, Liang Yunsheng was bored after playing frisbee the whole morning. She gasped for breath and felt that she could finally rest. Point 2. Hao Cheng respectfully took boredom's leash and said with a smile, Sir has gone to South Africa. Perhaps he won't come back for nearly half a year. 2. Liang Yunsheng was stunned for a moment, trying hard not to reveal the emotions in her heart. After calming down from the news, she put on a stiff smile and said, Will he be gone for so long, too? Could it be that he didn't want to see her again? What happened that he needed to be gone for so long, too? However, it seemed that she was overestimating herself. Point 2. How could Hao Cheng know what In Qianqian was thinking, too? 6 months, too. Another separation. And after all the bad memories, too. Liang Yunsheng's fingertip had painted a framed oil painting of a blue sky and white clouds in her room. It was supposed to be a part of her birthday present to him. It was very similar to the painting she had seen before, but it wasn't quite the same. Point 2. Right. Hao Cheng. Liang Yunsheng remembered something and hurriedly ran downstairs to find Hao Cheng. Do you still remember my small pottery figurines? Where did they go? 2. Hao Cheng was stunned for a moment and shook his head in confusion. I'm sorry, Miss Yunsheng. I didn't notice them after that, too. Hao Cheng looked very apologetic. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng was disappointed. Even if In Qianqian didn't like them, they were a gift that she made herself. Point 2. 2. On the private plane, an expressionless man was playing with a little girl's clay doll in his hand. His fingertips gently tapped on her round little face. His pale lips opened and uttered a word that couldn't be heard. Point 2. Stay 2. 2. In Qianqian left, but Liang Yinxing knew that she couldn't lose her goal because of this point 2. Even Yu Yue had his own career and goal to strive for, and she naturally couldn't fall behind point 2. After Yu Yue found out that Liang Yunsheng had oil painting skills, he volunteered to help her contact a seller. After a while, he found a few people who liked Liang Yunsheng's paintings, but their paintings had to be customized. Liang Yunsheng was subject to a lot of restrictions. Point 2. After accumulating some funds, Liang Yunsheng began to follow Yu Yue and began to learn how to invest in this project in a day's. Point 2. They made a few small moves. It was more appropriate to call it an investment than a speculation. Point 2. After paying the price for being young and losing everything for a few months, Liang Yunsheng began to wonder if it wasn't suitable for her to survive in the treacherous shopping mall until one day. She heard Yu Yue unintentionally say something like, "The big fish eats the small fish, eat the shrimp." She suddenly understood why Yin Xianqian wanted her to learn biology. Point 2. On the Earth, there was one mutually beneficial relationship, and that was the food chain. Point 2. Recently, their income had increased, and they were gradually prepared to take the money. They changed from an unstable speculation to a stable business model. The two of them were very enthusiastic about their small business. Point 2. The profits will double next month, and you will be a millionaire. As long as Yu Yue was with Liang Yunsheng, he would always smile. Have you ever thought about how to spend your coming-of-age ceremony? 2. Liang Yunsheng was stunned by Yu Yue's sudden words. Point 2. Coming-of-age ceremony? 2. An 18-year-old coming-of-age ceremony. 2. Had Yu Yue not mentioned it, Liang Yunsheng would have long forgotten about it, too. Only after Yu Yue's reminder did Liang Yunsheng realize that it had been 8 months since she had celebrated her 17th birthday in Germany. Point 2. Yu Yue actually knew the date of her birthday. Point 2. Fortunately, Yu Yue was by her side when she was lonely. Point 2. Lonely, too. Why did she suddenly feel like that? Everything was the same. It was just the absence of one person. Point 2. Just because of one person, would the whole world feel different? Of course, in everyone's life, there would always be one person. Point 2. Yu Yue reached out and held Liang Yunsheng's neck. When the time comes, I'll accompany you, okay? 2. Liang Yunsheng blinked, held his hand, and threw it down. We'll discuss it again, too. We'll discuss it again? Yu Yue's face darkened. A few days ago, Mr. Wu asked if you were free to help him paint a few more oil paintings of the previous styles, too. No, Liang Yunsheng refused decisively. Point 2. At first, there was no quick way to make money by painting. She wanted a challenge from zero. The requirements weren't high. At the very least, she'd no longer be cared for by Yin Qianqian. The starting capital could only be earned by herself. Point 2. That was why she had no choice. Now that their small business was on the right track, Liang Yunsheng naturally only wanted to treat painting as her personal hobby. If they went on, the stench of money would ruin her love. Point 2. Yu Yue focused on Liang Yunsheng's decision. Moreover, they didn't lack money. Point 2. Then do you want to go on a date with me in 2 days? Yu Yue smiled mischievously. One couldn't tell if he was sincere or a joking. Point 2. I'm not free. I want to go home to accompany boredom. Although Liang Yunsheng said this, she knew in her heart that she would go home every day and almost never stay out. Other than the fact that she didn't have this habit, she was afraid that she wouldn't go home. She missed the time when people just went home. Point 2. Is that your home? Yu Yue rarely said harsh words. This sentence didn't sound like much, but it pierced the point in Liang Yunsheng's heart that she minded. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng glanced at him and said nothing more. She just stood up and left the place where the two of them were talking. Point 2. After returning home, boredom continued as usual, giving her a surprise that wasn't a surprise. It pounced on her face and asked for a hug. Point 2. It was another year, and boredom was much bigger than before. This damn large dog. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng comforted him for a while, but he finally stopped shaking his head and tail. Point 2. Miss Yunsheng, it's almost your 18th birthday. Is there anything you want in particular? Hao Cheng asked with a smile. Point 2. He was the second person who mentioned it to her. In fact, there was still more than 3 months before her birthday. She was going to be 18 years old, which was always a very special age. Point 2. Liang Yinxing shook her head gently. Since coming to the Yin family, she no longer had a concept of material things. As for other things, she really wanted them, but she couldn't get them just because she wanted them. Point 2. Logically speaking, when Miss Yinsheng turns 18, she can wait for Sir to come back and get engaged. 2. Engaged too. Liang Yunxing's heart stirred slightly. She looked up and saw Hao Cheng's teasing expression. She couldn't help but blush and run back to her room. Point 2. At night, the shortest needle on the clock had already pointed to 2 o'clock. However, she wasn't sleepy because of what she had heard today. Point 2. The day in Qinshan left for South Africa, Hao Cheng had already given her the phone number he used there. Point 2. Liang Yunxing's fingertip gently swiped his name in the contact list on her phone, but she accidentally touched it. Point 2. Oh no, too. Just as Liang Yunsheng became flustered, worrying whether she should hang up or not, the call went through too. What time would it be in South Africa? 2. At the place 6 hours later than where Liang Yunsheng. He accurately received her call. Point 2. Hello. Hello. Liang Yunsheng said in a low voice, a little flustered. Point 2. Ever since the old villa, they'd never calmed down and had a proper conversation. Point 2. Even though Yin Qianqian had never had a proper conversation with her. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng subconsciously touched the side of her neck. There was still a scar there, and it was slightly hot. It was the mark that he had left on her body. Point 2. What happened? Yin Qianqian asked in a very formulaic tone. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng naturally didn't dare to say that she had accidentally touched the phone screen. She finally said, in 3 months, I will be 18. 2. Yin Qianqian said nothing. Point 2. Liang Yunsheng continued, will you come back? It won't take too long. It's just that it's my coming of age ceremony. 2. Probably not. 2. Yin Qianqian's voice sounded distant, and it was more than the physical distance. Point 2. It occurred to her that she acted coquettishly to Yin Qianqian before. At that time, the two of them had just met, so the phone call was still unfamiliar to them. Point 2. Mr. Yin, please. Liang Yunxing mumbled and softened her voice, repeating the same trick. Point 2. This is a willful request, Yin Qianqian said decisively. Point 2. Liang Yunxing's eyes were hot, as if she had just woken up from a dream. I'm sorry, too. She hurriedly hung up the phone, and that hateful shame rushed to her heart. She turned off the phone, threw it to her feet, and ignored it, too. What was wrong with her brain? To think that she would inexplicably miss a person on such a night. And a person who didn't care about her at all. Point 2. Human feelings were so complicated. One day, you treated a person as the whole of your life, but in fact, you were just a small speck of dust on their path. Point 2. Liang Yinxing buried her head in her quilt. The person she valued the most treated her as a speck of dust under their feet. Point 2. The next day, Liang Yinxing turned her phone back and was greeted by a series of missed calls from her communication assistant. Before she could take a closer look, she was interrupted by another call. Point 2. I was wrong. I apologize. I will never say such things again, okay? Just as she pressed the answer button, Yusiue's barrage of words came from the other side. Point 2. Why aren't you talking? Yusiue asked when he didn't hear Liang Yunxing's voice. He didn't think of anything else, but he thought that Liang Yunsheng was still angry with him. Point 2. Nothing. Liang Yunsheng was still angry. Point 2. As an apology, Yusiue said mysteriously, I will take you to a special place to celebrate your birthday. How about it, too? Where to? Liang Yunsheng asked. Point 2. Yusiue smiled evilly. Where to? You will know when the time comes. Are you afraid that I will eat you up? 2. Liang Yunxing couldn't help but laugh. She didn't expect Yusiue to say such a thing. If you want to come, then come. We'll deal with whatever comes our way, too. At that time, Yusiue didn't know that the little mischievous decision he made would turn the fate of them upside down. Location: intoxication. Point 2. 11 at night. Point 2. In the noisy bar, there were lively voices of people, the lost, decadence, and clamor. Those who had company were partying, while those who didn't were enjoying the loneliness. Point 2. The girl was wearing fiery red high heels, her long black hair cascading down her body. She wore a fiery red dress. The makeup on her face wasn't thick, but she had a rose-colored lip gloss, which made her appear pure and innocent. There was a hint of sexiness. It was so tempting that one couldn't stop and wanted to approach her. Point two. However, she already had a flower protector by her side, which made those who tried to approach her timid. Point two. Please, I'm 18 today. It's not a problem for me to enter. What about you, Siua? Liang Yinsheng curled the corners of her lips and looked at Yu Siua, who was pretending to be mature beside her. She chuckled and said, 16 years old, barely. I just got my ID too. Was it the special 18-year-old gift that you, Siua, mentioned too? It really disappointed her too. Did she think that bringing her to a bar would scare her too? If it was 2 years ago, that Liang Yinsheng might have been embarrassed. Point two. After almost a year in Germany, she'd already been to such a place, but she'd always disliked such places. Point two. It wasn't that she was afraid. It was just too easy to lose herself in such a place. Point two. Even though she knew that Yusiua wanted to play tricks, she still chose to indulge herself. Point two. TSK. You think it's that simple? Today is a Noit du di Seijo. As a grown-up, don't you want to play, too? A Noit du di Seijo, too. In Spanish, the meaning of a night of desire. It wasn't a good word. Point two. Before Liang Yinsheng finished her sentence, all the lights in the room were extinguished. Everyone was shocked, too. A Noit du di Seijo. The rules were naturally different from the rest. Point two. In an unexpected time, all the lights in the room were extinguished and turned on 5 minutes later. Other than illegal things, one could do anything. Hugging, kissing, or touching. Anything related to desire was allowed to exist. One couldn't resist. Point two. As long as one walked into the intoxicated person, they would obey this rule. Liang Yinsheng was stunned. Ice-cold lips touched her lips. This kiss. Point two. It wasn't deep, but it was a malicious sip of hot wine in her mouth. Point two. Liang Yinsheng was so hot that tears were about to come out. However, in such a chaotic situation, no one could see such a beautiful scene. Point two. She was kissed, too. You see you at. Point two. She was touched on the lips and was disgusted, too. Why was it like this? Not only did she hate the kiss, but she also hated herself. She hated herself because she thought of that person. Point two. Why couldn't it be him? She suddenly became disgusted with herself. Point two. She subconsciously reached out and slapped Yusiua. Point two. I'm sorry, I can't afford it. Liang Yinsheng lowered her eyes and quickly turned around to leave. Point two. Yusiua touched the corner of his broken lips and revealed a desolate smile. 2. You want to find your little girlfriend? Suddenly, a voice appeared beside Yusiua. He turned around and found that it was Ling Mo's annoying face. Point two. You probably don't know what kind of stuff you just drank, right? Ling Mo picked up Yusiua's cup and shook it in his hand, smiling evilly. Point two. Yusiua held the chair with one hand. Sure enough, a strange heat rushed from his lower abdomen to the rest of his body. At this moment, he was thinking of something more important. Point two. Just now, Liang Yinsheng also drank a mouthful of the wine that he had fed her. Point two. Liang Yinsheng suddenly felt a stuffy and hot feeling in her chest. How did I get drunk after just one mouthful of wine? She thought. Point two. The wine was very strong. She usually didn't touch such things. It was because Germany was a big beer country. Therefore, when she occasionally drank a cup, other than turning into Guangong's face, it was nothing. However, it couldn't be compared to such a high degree of wine. Point two. There was a feeling of discomfort in her stomach. She couldn't help but feel like vomiting. She squatted on the ground and retched. She couldn't vomit no matter how hard she tried. Point two. The wine really made her drunk a little too quickly. Point two. She probably wouldn't be able to last until she took a taxi home. Point two. Because she thought that if Hao Cheng knew where she wanted to go, he would definitely think of a way to stop her. So she secretly ran out of the house. Point two. Liang Yunxing's mind flashed back to Hao Cheng's disappointed expression when he proposed to celebrate her birthday, but she rejected him. Point two. She tried her best to pull herself together and took out her cell phone. She wanted to call Hao Cheng and ask him to send a car to pick her up. Point two. It wasn't even 12. She still had time to eat the cake that they had prepared for her. Point two. Liang Yinsheng couldn't control herself. Her hands started to tremble and her phone fell to the ground. Her feet felt light, as if she had stepped on cotton. Point two. She reached to pick up the phone, but there was an inexplicable double image in front of her. It made her look down on the situation in front of her. Point two. What's going on? She thought. Point two. The situation was abnormal. Two. A man's long hand picked up the phone and handed it to her. Point two. Thank you, she said in a low voice as she reached out to take it. Point two. Unexpectedly, the man seemed to be deliberately teasing her and withdrew his hand. She staggered and fell into his arms. Point two. She suddenly felt goosebumps and had a terrible thought. Point two. Late at night, a drunk girl and a strange man too. Don't touch me. She pushed the man away. The man didn't forcefully hold her back and released her. Point two. Her gaze fell on a man's face, but she couldn't focus it. She could only feel that the man was about the same height as In Qianshun, and he seemed to be a little stronger than him. She probably didn't know what In Qianshun looked like. Point two. He had abandoned her and left for so long, too. Why was she thinking of him again, too? From the beginning, didn't she know, too? In Qianshun was treating her as a joke and a pet. Point two. Why, too? Why was she still, too? Probably because of the effects of the alcohol. She became more unstable. She suddenly started to cry, and pearl-like tears fell down her smooth face. Point two. Perhaps it was the tender tears that touched the man's heart, but he suddenly walked over and reached out to hug her. Point two. She felt a warm and soft object gently brush past her face. Point two. That man was lowering his head and kissing her falling tears, too. No! Liang Yunxing's body trembled, and she resisted. The alcohol and drug effect had reached their peak, and she didn't have the strength to move anymore. She reached out to grab the man's lapel and suddenly asked, "In? Is that you, In Qianshun?" The man didn't answer her question, nor did he let go of her hand. Point two. Let go. Who are you? Liang Yunsheng felt dizzy, and her legs were weak. Even though she tried hard to struggle, it was just like playing with tickles, not to mention this man in front of her. Point two. The man grabbed her wrist to stop her. Point two. The feeling of her wrist being grabbed was a little familiar. Point two. In Qianshun, in a trance, she vaguely felt that she had seen the man's face clearly. She felt like she had really seen him, too. The man responded softly. Point two. It's really you. Liang Yunsheng suddenly wrapped her arms around his neck and rubbed her head against his shoulder. Point two. Why did you suddenly abandon me? Liang Yunxing's voice sounded a little aggrieved and a little miserable. Are you angry at me for doing something wrong? If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have meddled in other people's business. Why did you abandon me, too? Liang Yunsheng kept talking. If the person standing in front of her was the real In Qianshun, then he would be able to understand what she meant. Point two. The man paused for a moment and didn't move again. He just reached out his hand and gently touched the hair on her head. No, you're not him. Liang Yunxing's nerves were triggered, and she suddenly became excited. She let go of the man in front of her. He wouldn't be so gentle, too. Perhaps he wasn't in the mood to continue pestering the crazy girl in front of him. He walked forward and directly carried her away from the ground. Point two. Let go of me. Let go of me quickly. Don't touch me. Disgusting. Liang Yunsheng struggled. She didn't want to be touched by anyone. Point two. Don't touch, too. At first, she could still shout, but her body was getting hotter and hotter, and her strength was fading. Point two. Shut up. The man's voice was steady and magnetic. Point two. Liang Yunsheng stopped moving and didn't speak. Her whole body was soft, and she could only lie in that man's arms. Point two. Lowering her head, Liang Yunsheng moved her face closer and hid in his arms. She started to sob softly. Point two. When the alcohol and the drug were mixed together, Liang Yunxing's excitement had passed. Now, her body was soft and her breathing was rapid. She felt like she couldn't breathe. Point two. She's really dumb, the man said with a sigh. He hugged her body tightly and didn't let her move. Point two. The man walked straight to his car. He showed no mercy. He threw her in the back seat and walked to the driver's seat. Then, he parked the car in front of a star-rated hotel. Point two. Without hesitation, he went to the back seat of the car, picked up Liang Yunsheng, whose mind was completely controlled by the drug, and strode into the hotel. He took the VIP channel in the hotel. It was late at night, and there was no one else around. Point two. He lowered his head to look at the person in his arms. His usually cold face showed a moment of helplessness. Go where? Go where? Liang Yinsheng said softly but pleasantly. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng mumbled to herself. But of course, she couldn't get an answer. Point 2. At this moment, Liang Yunxing's face was flushed red. Other than the heat all over her body, there were also waves of itchy, throbbing. Point 2. She really wanted to. What did she want to? She didn't know that her mind was in a mess, and her body was uncomfortable. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng swallowed her saliva. Her limbs and bones felt like they were being gnawed on by tiny ants. Point 2. What should she do to? That damned Yue. What did he drink to? Suddenly, an ice-cold object touched her lips, making her feel very comfortable. She couldn't help but go forward and chase after the feeling that made her feel cool. Point 2. She was kissed, but it wasn't as annoying as the previous time. In front of her small nose, she smelled a familiar scent, making her feel at ease. Point 2. It wasn't intense, but it was a very possessive kiss, which seemed to tell her who she belonged to. Point 2. After the kiss was over, a cool mineral water slowly entered her mouth. Liang Yinsheng felt the liquid slowly slide from her mouth into her scalding body. Point 2. But this little bit of coolness couldn't be her final salvation. It wasn't enough. She wanted more, too. She opened her eyes in a daze and saw Yin Qianshun sitting on a leather chair beside her. Point 2. His deep and slightly sunken brows had formed a natural gully when he saw Liang Yinsheng waking up. He was stern. Under his sharp nose, his thin, pale lips were tightly pursed into a straight line. Point 2. It's really you. Liang Yinsheng was relieved. In fact, her mind was still abnormally blurry at the moment, but that was how she was. She could feel his aura. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng was lying on the soft bed in the hotel. Her body was gasping weakly. The only thing she had was to lift her eyelids slightly to see the strength of the person in front of her. Point 2. Her mental strength fought with the most primitive desire in her body. Point 2. In Qianshan didn't speak. He stood up and placed a hand beside her ear. He leaned over and looked at her face expressionlessly. His entire body was filled with a murderous aura. It was obvious that he was very unhappy. Point 2. Liang Yinsheng could no longer struggle. She could only move her head slightly. It would take a lot of her strength to move her body. Point 2. The heat flow in her body became more intense as she woke up. Point 2. Don't too. It was so embarrassing. It was better not to see him in such a situation, too. Liang Yinsheng bit her lower lip and grabbed the cloth on her body. She turned her face away, not wanting to look at Yin Qianshun. Point 2. However, the more unwilling she was to face Yin Qianshun, the more he reached out his hand to hold her delicate chin. Point 2. You went to the bar dressed like this? You must have done this to get this touch, right? Yin Qianshan snorted, and his strong palm slowly touched her slim waist. Point 2. Liang Yunxing's waist immediately softened after being touched. She finally let go of her clenched teeth and let out a soft sound, which was mixed with a sob that made one's heart itch. Point 2. No, too. Don't do this, too. It was a simple sentence, but Liang Yunsheng said it as if it was as difficult as lifting a boulder. Point 2. She didn't know whether she wanted to escape or whether she was willing to indulge in the mysterious perception that shouldn't appear in her body. Point 2. On the bed, her fiery red clothes and crimson face were even more alluring. The heat kept rising, and the surrounding air filled with heat. Point 2. That willful hand started a fire over her body. Point 2. She was in extreme pain, but not only was she being burned by fire, because deep in the bones and blood of her body, there was also an unusual, sour expectation. Point 2. Do you really want to be treated like this? Yin Qinshin's voice was playful, completely devoid of the usual coldness. Point 2. I didn't. After saying a few words, Liang Yinshin couldn't help but let out a soft moan. Point 2. She could no longer control her voice or her actions. One of her hands gripped the quilt under her body, and her body twisted. Point 2. Don't move unless I tell you to. Yin Qinshan followed, where he had just touched, and gently massaged her waist. Point 2. Ah! Liang Yinsheng sniffled and complained in a nasal voice. Bad person, too. Bad person from the beginning. Didn't you know that I'm a bad person? Yin Qinshin's breathing became heavier. Point 2. He He lowered his head and kissed her ear. Liang Yinshang trembled, but he didn't let her go. He opened his mouth and gently bit her ear again. He kissed the neck that still had a small scar point too. The wound was very shallow, but it seemed deeper. It was a deep and insurmountable gap between the two of them point two. After rubbing their ears together, the heat between the two didn't decrease, but instead increased. The air they inhaled had a strong scent of desire. Liang Yunxing's rose-red dress was pulled off her body point two. In Qianshun picked her up. The weak Liang Yunsheng could only lean on him. Her delicate and soft body was in his arms, as white and cute as a newborn baby point two. However, she wasn't as honest as a baby. She hummed twice, rubbing and touching her body subconsciously point two, asking for it too. This is the thing you should remember the most about tonight. In Qianshun's voice was a little distant, but Liang Yunsheng could still hear it clearly. He said, "Don't be so stupid and fall for someone else's trick. Let's see if you'll follow someone else so naturally in the future, too." She really wanted to ask, since you knew I would fall for it, why didn't you save me during that time? However, she was so powerless, and she was intoxicated by this passionate entanglement point too. Today is the day you come of age. In Qianshun's voice sounded hoarse. He lowered his head and kissed her between her eyebrows, the tip of her nose, her lips, and her chin. Bit by bit, it was like a dragonfly skimming the water, and there was some special love point too. Liang Yinsheng moaned in a daze. When she heard In Qianshun's words, her heart trembled slightly. He still remembered the important day that he had for her today, point two. She didn't know if it was because she was touched or because she was surprised, but she thought that she wasn't worth mentioning. No, it was because she wouldn't live in any small corner of his heart point too. I want to give you a special gift. After In Qianshun said that his actions were no longer as gentle as before. He was overbearing and ruthless, but there was a trace of impatience that couldn't be controlled point too.